You're listening to the Nacho Kids podcast, where we discuss all things step-family related. Real stories, real people, real help. Your hosts are the creators of the Nacho Kids Method and the Nacho Kids Academy Step Family Coaching Team, Lori and David Sims.
Today we have Renee Rodriguez. Hello, Renee. How are you?
Hi, I am doing okay. How are you?
Doing well. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you created the custody blueprint, but before we get started with that, what do you do and what made you do it?
So I'm a custody consultant. And what we do is we help protective parents who are in a custody dispute with a, let's say, high conflict co-parent, an abusive co-parent, to help them build a case strategy and organize their evidence in a compelling and relevant way to get the custody arrangement that is safest, that is best for their children. I came to this work as someone who fled an abusive situation myself and ended up doing a custody battle of my own. I was lucky at the beginning of my custody battle, and this was before the internet was full of so much wonderful, sometimes confusing, but mostly wonderful information, where the word narcissist, you couldn't even find that. Nobody really understood what narcissistic personality disorder meant. So I accidentally happened upon one of the first divorce coaches in the field, the head of One Mom's Battle, Tina Swithin, and she and I worked together. There came a point in my custody case where we were appointed a custody evaluator.
Okay.
And 85 to 90% of judges will go along with whatever an evaluator recommends. Mm-hmm. So we knew that this was the most important piece. And Tina said to me, I actually have no experience in prepping for this, but my background at that time in the corporate world had been strategy. And so she said, you're a strategist. Why don't you just put something together? We'll take a look at it and do our best. So she took a look at what I created. And she said, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen the abuse laid out so clearly. You should be coaching. To which I said, slow your roll. I'm still in the middle of my own battle. But about a year and a half later, someone else in my community was saying, I don't know if you know this, but Tina is giving your templates everywhere, all over the place.
You're like, what? She needs to be selling those things.
Well, but what it told me, what she said, and it's working. She said, so you should take those and you should build on it because, you made it fit your moment in your case, but you also know what the whole case is like. So you're doing this kind of work in the corporate world. Why don't you build a methodology instead for the family court world? And so about 10 years ago, I went ahead and did that. And I've been in this field as a custody strategist ever since.
I love that in more ways than one. One of the things that I like is that you said a protective parent.
Yeah.
Because I was a protective parent. I'm still a protective parent.
Yeah.
But so often we're high conflict is what we're called. And it's not always being high conflict. It's being protective. And, people are pushed for 50-50 constantly.
Yeah.
And in my situation, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, it was not in my child's best interest to be 50-50 with his dad. Or even to be 70-30, like the least amount of time, the better.
Right.
But I didn't have quote proof.
Right.
Because a lot of the proof is the narcissistic behavior.
Yeah.
And I know people throw that word around a lot. They didn't back in the day, but now everybody's got it, right?
Everybody's got it.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
But I know how hard it was for me because when I would go to an attorney, and he would say, well, you might want to agree to, the whatever it is, him wanting to keep him Sunday nights, taking to school Monday morning because this judge is known for the 3-5 split, blah, blah, blah. And you're probably you're lucky if that's all he gives him is what he's asking for. He might give him more. You might lose more time. And I was like, I cannot willingly give up more time of my son with his dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank goodness the judge that I had, my attorney asked his dad a question, and just his response, I could tell the judge flipped
Mm.
because the attorney asked him something and he went, that little smart aleck kind of thing. And I saw the judge's face like just change. And I'm like, whew, he sees it. Because again, how do you prove it? Be like, well, he's just not a good person, right? I mean, how do you prove that? And that it's not good for your kid?
Well, you can't, it's narcissistic personality disorder, which is different from narcissism. Look, we're all on the narcissism spectrum, or we wouldn't be able to achieve goals, right? But there's a difference between narcissistic personality disorder and even people who are very high on that spectrum. And with NPD, it is very covert. It is coercive control most of the time. And Lori, I'm glad that you used the term high conflict, because this is something I state this as often as possible. I do not like when courts call it a high conflict custody battle. It's not a high conflict custody battle. It is a custody battle with a high conflict co-parent.
Right.
One of these people is high conflict. Do you know 95% of parents who get divorced, they don't go inside of a court battle. They figure it out across the kitchen table. They do it in mediation. They do it in arbitration with lawyers, whatever. So in spite of the fact that family court has a full roster all the time, that's only 5%. Now, of that 5%, 75% of those couples, of those parents who are in court have an abuser among them. And yet they're labeled a high conflict custody case. It's not a high conflict custody case. It is a protective parent looking for justice, looking for help against a high conflict co-parent.
Right.
And it is hard to prove. The way that we are working with clients to get them to get evidence going, we're really looking for certain spots that we know the court will respond to.
Right.
That we know that the court will see this and say, yeah, this is definitely proof of who this person is. You often can't prove the narcissism. You got lucky. Yours showed up in court and said, I'm a narcissist, but that works for me and everyone should give me what I want. And that's, more of an overt type. Those can be, although not always, but they can be easier. But the covert types, these are the ones who are high functioning. They're paragons in, society, right? In their community. They're police officers, they're politicians, they're teachers, they're professors, they're anybody's. They don't even need to be, the mayor of something, but they can be because it's high functioning.
Right.
Not everybody is seeing that. But the bigger question is something that I think people don't sit back and think about enough when they're in these battles. And that is this. Very often I will hear lawyers say to their clients, and I will hear judges say this too, so what? He's a jerk. That doesn't mean that he's not a good father to these children. And so they might even be overt narcissists. Do you know what I'm saying? They might actually be people who are problematic on paper, problematic when they show up. But the 14th Amendment, thanks to Troxel versus Granville, basically says that they have the right to be a parent to their child. So the first part of the fight, if we're not trying to remove parental access because of egregious abuse that they can see, is to stay away from the 50-50 that a lot of people say, well, the judge will just give you that, which is a beat of mine, because many bad lawyers will scare their clients into it by saying the judge just gives everybody 50-50. This judge is going to give you guys 50-50. And the thing of it is that when I have clients where I'm like, I think you should move forward. If it's going to be 50-50, make the judge give it to you, because then you can go back and get it modified. If you agree to it on paper, it's nigh on impossible to get it modified, because you go into court, right, to get the judge to modify, and the judge is going to turn to you and say, Ms. Sims, is this your signature on this, you know what I'm saying? It's like, is this your signature here? Is that what this is? And the answer is going to be it is. So it becomes something that doesn't work. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? So really the first thing that we are looking at is how do we keep it from being 50-50, even in a 50-50 presumptive state? How
Right.
do we get it so that the children are experiencing the same structure they had when they were in the house with both parents,
Right.
including the absentee-ish parent, right? The parent who couldn't be bothered behind closed doors, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
What was that setup? And by and large, when there is an abuse victim, we find that abuse victim was above and beyond the primary caregiver, the
Right.
sole caregiver many times,
Mm-hmm.
right? So talking 50-50 is not great for the children. And the studies that show it, that the courts go off of, if people actually read the actual study, every one of these studies have a line in it that specifically says if there is conflict, this does not work.
Nobody reads that line, though.
No.
No, they don't. And with my son, we actually split up before I found out I was pregnant.
Mm.
So we were never together. And I remember the first couple of times, I went through court the whole 18 years. It's like a revolving door, right? He just kept dragging me to court and dragging me to court.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I kept hearing his attorney say is that I was a bitter ex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that left, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it had nothing to do with me. It was about my kid.
Right.
And it's so hard to convince an attorney who you are as a person, for them to convince a judge in 15 minutes or whatever it is, that you're not crazy. You're not just being the bitter ex, that there's something that needs to be looked at before even giving this child to the ex for 10 minutes by themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's right. When we have moms who come in who left while still pregnant, in many ways, it almost becomes easier for that 50-50 to be suggested, shockingly, given the breastfeeding needs of many, most infants, right? And it's because there is no precedent. And yet that doesn't make sense because they're not looking at the precedent so much with the clients who are leaving with older children. But when there's an unborn child, there's this tendency to push towards that, which is completely nonsensical given, a newborn's needs.
Yeah, I had a judge that one of the things that we brought up was the breastfeeding thing. And his response was pump or giving formula.
Yeah. There's such a lack of understanding. Dr. Nancy Dittweiler has an open letter that everyone who's listening in the situation should just go onto the internet and find it. And it should be part of your case. She does an excellent job of talking about why breastfeeding is important. Another person I like to put out there for people is Dr. Isabel Fox, who talks about breastfeeding, but also talks about the fact that actually, even with grandparents, children being left alone for overnights before the age of 4 can be problematic. And here's why, et cetera, right? And sometimes there's just a need, and you're not in a nuclear family, you're in an extended family. So it's not like you're leaving them anywhere. They're still at home. That's different.
Right.
But this eagerness to have these littles into overnights, and many of them, at 4 years old are still breastfeeding. They're doing extended breastfeeding, right? When it comes to the breastfeeding, there's such a lack of understanding of pumping and how the mother's milk starts to dissipate if it's just pumping or too much pumping versus breastfeeding, right? There's a lack of understanding of how much milk an infant will take, or a baby, a child will take from the bottle, even if it's pumped. There's also just the systemic failure of where am I supposed to pump if I'm out and about doing things, right?
Right.
It's so I'm in my car or I'm in a city where am I going to pump if I have to? So there are so many reasons why that it's adult-headed thing, to be honest with you, to say, just go pump. It shows a complete lack of understanding.
Right.
And I know there's a woman who is looking at possibly, these things are very slow to go, I'll tell you that right now, but starting to work on the idea of this actually being a form of potentially a form of sexism, where it's like, you're just not understanding structurally
right.
how it works. You're not understanding biologically how it works. So that we put the infants first. We know We know from the World Health Organization, if we want to go there, we know from books, from literature, from anything, that children who breastfeed at least the first 2 years, if not the first 4 years of their life, are far more immune to disease, that their chances of getting cancer in life are just plummet if they've got that breastfeeding. So for the court to come in and basically say, no, just go pump and they'll drink what they will, it's supposed to be family court. It's supposed to be in the best interest of the children.
Right.
And that is one area where it is completely clear and easy as to what is in the best interest of the child. If you've got a breastfeeding child, then they should be with the mother who is breastfeeding them for as long as that child is not weaning, whether there's reasons for the mom to wean or whenever the child is ready to wean, somewhere in the second, third, fourth year, who knows? It depends on the child, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing when you look at the science behind that versus the politics and structure of the family court.
Right. I know too, you mentioned something about, the child spending overnights and them being young. So my son was born in March, and the first long overnight thing, I think he was like 9 months or so. But anyway, around Christmas, he had to go for like a week. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
Yes, it was horrible on me. But when I got my baby back, he would not look at me.
Yeah.
He's less than a year old, and he was mad at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would go in his room, and I'd go in there, and he'd be like, he was mad. And I was like, what in the world? And then it hit me. I'm like, he thinks I left him. The bad thing is he wasn't even with his dad. His dad left him at his dad's.
Oh, yeah.
So he's in even a more unfamiliar environment, sleeping with the sister, his aunt. I mean, it was like, what in the world?
This is so what's experienced here, what may have been experienced here, and children have to have a secure base, is what it's called. I think it's Bowlby who talks about secure base, right? But when that is rattled, let's say, then it is about, once they get back, there's that dysregulation. There's that they're acclimating again back into the secure attachment that they have with you, in this case, that he had with you. And, parents report that it can take their child 45 minutes to settle into being back home with their primary caregiver. Even if it's a 50-50 arrangement, there's still a primary caregiver. It's just the other half of the time they're doing a whole lot of nothing with the other parent, right? Mm-hmm. But some parents say it can take 3 or 4 days, maybe longer for the outliers, right? Yeah. But it can take a few days before these kids are back to normal. But then if you're in a 50-50, they're going right back to the other household.
Yeah.
Right.
They get 2 days of being normal and then they're back.
Yeah. So there's constant dysregulation. The most regulating place is going to be with their primary attachment figure, who is probably going to be the protective parent and is usually the protective mother. Mm-hmm. And the other place would be school. But many times if you have an abusive co-parent, they can mess with the school as well, right? They can drop them off late, which, tardiness, we all try to get our kids there on time. We don't always succeed, but most of the time we do. But there's such an interesting phenomenon that happens when a child is late to school. It actually derails their entire day, right? So to be late, to walk in late, to be stared at, to feel not in tune with everyone, not in tune with the teacher, to be the one that's a little bit behind, that's actually, that little moment of being 5 minutes late creates something far bigger. And now we're rattling these kids, to use that word again, right? So that's what's happening for them. So it's one thing, again, a protective parent is, the great parents are going to get their kids to school late and just be all like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But I think this is one of the places where it's important to gather documentation for a custody case. It's like, if there are that many tardies or that many times being pulled out, and it's not for the dentist who won't do after school hours or simply doesn't have those appointments available for months on end, but it's just because grandpa was in town, we're starting to build documentation to show that we don't have stability
Right.
in the other house. Excuse me. Stability is one of the key things that I always want protective parents to be able to show they have and show is missing
Mm-hmm.
from the narcissistic co-parent so that they can get something that's not the 50-50.
Right. I remember one time my son was on medicine, and I had told him, I said, here's the cup. I sent instructions with his dad or whatever. And my son was probably 5, but he's always been an old soul. It's like talking to an 80-year-old man. And I asked him when I picked him up, I said, did you take your medicine today? And he said, yeah, I took a swig. I said, a swig? He said, yeah, my dad gave me the bottle and told me to take a swig.
Mm.
I'm like, I'm telling you, it is by the grace of God, and I'm not exaggerating, that my son is alive.
Medical neglect is a very difficult thing. And it's funny how medical neglect comes into it, because it'll be, they either won't administer the medicine themselves, which they absolutely need to. That's their job.
Mm-hmm.
It's their job. You have to administer the medicine to your child. It doesn't matter how used to it. Doesn't matter if it's a daily thing for them. It doesn't matter.
Right.
If they have to take puffs with their inhaler, you got to pay attention to the prescribed part, right? Obviously, they use it on their own as needed. But the prescriptive part of it needs to be, you have to be monitoring.
Right.
I think the other way we see medical neglect is with allergies. Many of them refuse to believe that there are allergies or treat them. And so then again, they come back home. And what is that primary attachment figure doing? What is that primary caregiver doing? Nursing them back to health, only to send them back into the other household.
Right. Exactly. I know with my son, I don't know why, we never really put our finger on it, but every time I would pick him up from his dad, I would have to bring a barf bag because he was going to get sick. Don't know why. I know in the beginning it was his dad smoked in the house. And so I told him, I said, you can't do that.
Right.
Well, of course, that didn't go over well because how dare I try to control his home.
Right.
But I had the doctor write a thing. It's like, look, your son is asthmatic. He cannot be in a house where there's smoke. And so from that point on, I think he didn't smoke in the house when Jackson was there, but it's already in the house, right? At that point. But I see it all the time too, where a parent won't believe, oh, well, I'm not giving the kid their ADD medicine because I don't think they have ADD.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the kid's bouncing, boomeranging back and forth from being on their medicine and not, and being on their medicine and not. And it's just not good for these kids. And I wish there was a way, and your custody blueprint may be the perfect answer to this. I need to look at it. But there needs to be a way that parents are looked into a little bit more before just that generic 50-50 or the generic 5-3 split or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So there sort of is a way. The custody eval that I talked about earlier is the job of someone, usually someone who is some sort of a therapist, mental health or something like that, usually, but not always, who they come in and they spend at minimum 2 months, but usually 3 to 6 months, alternating long interviews with each parent. Maybe they're doing home visit here and there. Maybe the child is also coming to their office. The children are coming to their office as well. There might also there's going to be a body of evidence, and that's a big part of what we're working on clients with as well, so that the evaluator can see what's going on behind closed doors instead of that wonderful, charming, because they're meeting the same person that you fell in love with, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody dates an abuser, right? You date a charming, wonderful person who pulls you in, makes you fall in love with that facade, that persona, and then suddenly that facade was indeed a facade. The persona is indeed something that's fake, but now here you are locked into somebody you've moved in, you've married, you've had children with. That's the person you leave, right? The monster that you leave. But nobody's dating an abuser. Nobody's dating a monster. Right. They're dating a wonderful person. Well, of course, that's who the court is largely seeing. And when there's an evaluator, that's who they're seeing as well. So people are always like, why can't they see through them? And it's kind of like, well, you're a smart, wonderful person, and you didn't see through them because they are that good. They're definitely going to lay it on thick with these people. So the body of evidence becomes an important part of that. That's the investigation. Now, there's a lot of controversy around this, Lori, because the thing of it is that many people don't want the evaluator in there because catch-22, if you have an evaluator in there for 6 months, then you're now creating a status quo. So if it was a trial 50-50, now you have 6 more months of 50-50. Well, family court many times considers 6 months, maybe as much as a year, but 6-month mark is the most frequent mark where family court considers that a status quo has been created for the children. Now they don't want to upset that 50-50 while you're waiting to get the evaluation to show that it shouldn't have been 50-50 in the first place. So that's a catch-22. The other is that these evaluations, and if you're in Canada, then you're looking at it we call an examination, possibly an investigation, or an assessment. It's expensive. It's going to be tens of thousands of dollars quite frequently. I have clients in California who are paying about $75,000 for an evaluator. Same type of evaluation someplace else might be $12,000 or $7,500 at least per person, right? And so you have to look at, when does that become gouging? When does it make sense if they're looking through all kinds of body of evidence and they're interviewing people and they're sitting and they're synthesizing, right? To figure out, what is the recommendation I'm going to give to the court, knowing that the court's pretty much going to follow it, right? So that's one way to do it. The other way, of course, is to go through court. But if you want to talk about having the least amount of control, the courtroom's going to be it. We don't know who went before you. We don't know where you are in the day. We don't know what side of the bed the judge woke up on. And the other thing is, statistics do show that however things have been going are how they're probably going to keep going. What I mean is, if your ex has won 3 times in a row, don't go in the court. Because the judges, even if a new judge comes in, there's still a good chance that they're going to look at the record and be all like, well, it seems like there's a reason this guy has been winning.
Right. They're swayed, right?
They are. And listen, is there corruption out there? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we're also looking at human biases and prejudices, that type of bias as well. But let's put aside the bad people who are in family court, just as there are bad people in every profession, right? Let's put them off to the side. They exist. They suck. We get it. Let's just look at human beings who are trying to do the best they can, but have 0 domestic violence training, 0 trauma-informed training, except for conferences where they might sit for 90 minutes and maybe they'll be paying attention to the facilitator. Maybe they'll be catching up on emails because they're at a conference, so they're not in court, right? So let's remember that's what we're dealing with, right? Now, I spent 2 years to become a full-fledged DV advocate. And I got to tell you, the amount of stuff that I learned made me realize that my opinion, very unpopular, is that nobody should be in family court without having spent 2 years doing the kind of stuff that I did. Because if you want to be able to recognize whether or not something is domestic violence, whether it's coercive control, whether it's this, whether it's that, it's to get the full-fledged education. Well, I just told you earlier in our conversation that 75% of the people in front of them have an abuser among them. So it is their responsibility to be as deeply trained as any DV expert in what they are doing. But instead, which, you know what, isn't completely nonsensical, I'm going to say that, but instead you've got the judge sort of judging what they're seeing. You've got the evaluator sort of doing their best. So in my opinion, those are the ones, if I were to pick just one of the court professionals in the big group of people you're up against when you go into court, it would have to be the evaluators, right? Maybe the guardians ad litem as well, because let's say your GAL is just sort of like, well, it's not always, we shouldn't always just be giving children to moms or whatever, instead of just saying it's not about moms versus dads. It's about primary caregiver and non-abusers. That's what we're looking for here. Who is the primary caregiver? Who is not the abuser in this situation, right? Who is not doing the alienation, right?
Right.
These are the people that you come across, the guardians ad litem, the evaluators, the judges, the lawyers who on their websites talk about how their experience with DV, but be careful because experience with DV, if 75% of people go into court are dealing with DV, 75% of their clients then perhaps is dealing with DV. And when you really ask that lawyer you're considering what they mean by it, they're going to answer because they've had clients who've experienced it. Well, that is nowhere near enough.
Right.
Nowhere near enough to understand your situation and what's going on for you. And so, if only there were a way for people to know, better trained, and for the evaluators to really be deep DV experts, or to bring in a DV expert to help do an assessment, a danger assessment or a risk assessment, determine what we're seeing in front of them. There are some tools, but many evaluators use them, but most still don't, like just a survey tool to at least get a sense. Right. So I think, in reality, what we're looking at is the type of work that I'm doing, which is to say, we have to get a body of evidence going.
Right. And that's so important. I know for some reason it's got the hand raised.
It does. Oh, you know what? I always wonder if there's like some sort of
there we go
voice command thing these days. So as I'm saying, it really comes down to the way you're presenting your case, because you can't control the judge, your lawyer, the evaluator, the guardian ad litem. You very much are looking at how can I present myself? And, and that's the work I enjoy doing.
Without getting emotional.
Yes.
Because, it's your kid. You're going to get emotional. I know a friend of mine, he recently represented himself in court. And I said, I have no idea how you did that.
Yeah.
Because I can keep myself calm and behaved and all that good stuff. But you start talking about my baby, I'm on, you're just on edge. You're right there.
Right.
And he said, I just kept telling myself, this is about my son. I've got to be calm. I was like, well, good for you. Because for me, I'd be like, no, I'd be afraid I'd mess something up.
Well, and many parents are in the room with the abuser. They fled, and there they are. And their abuser's given a lot of power in court because they have the right to be there. They have the right to be represented. They have the right to have their voices heard, and they manipulate that opportunity. And that's triggering as well. When that trauma shows up, there go the protective parents fitting right into the crazy and mentally ill and overly anxious narrative that the other side is painting about them. Because again, the court is not trained in recognizing what is trauma versus what is not.
Right. I know there was this one judge that I had. He had just became a judge. I actually had used him as my attorney first. And then, of course, he became a judge, so we couldn't use him. But he was the one that it wasn't like he was trying to be, quote, quote, mean. He was trying to see the best in everybody. I bet he's changed his opinion now on a lot of things, but it was, oh, well, you should, if the ex wants to come pick the kid up from daycare and tells you last minute and take him to dinner, that should be okay. And, you think, well, yeah, that should be okay. Until the ex knows it's your mom's birthday, knows you have plans, and then says, oh, I'm picking up little Johnny from school today and taking him wherever. And you're like, no, we've got plans. Oh, well, you're disobeying the court order. I'm taking you to court for contempt.
Yep.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So when that first court order was drawn up, it's like, okay, this looks good and reasonable. Thinking I was dealing with somebody that could be reasonable. I knew better. It had to be black and white, no gray.
Yeah, it does.
And then, of course, you get in front of the judge. And like you said, it depends on the day they had, what side of the bed they woke up on. Are they going through a divorce? Are they just mad at women because their wife cheated on them? Or, what's going on with them? Because no matter how much they try not to have these biases and be impartial, it's human nature.
It is. Yeah. And sure, there are, judges, lawyers, there's court professionals who get a reputation for this is basically how they feel about women. This is how they feel about, breastfeeding. This is how they feel about private school. And it's important to know that. But again, it boils down to how you are presenting your case and how you are presenting yourself.
Right. Yeah. I know it's hard. Like I said in the beginning, it's hard to try to expect somebody else to portray who you are. And some attorneys, like judges, there's some good ones. Out of all the attorneys I've had, there is one that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he wanted what was best for my son.
Mm.
The others were your normal attorneys of just keep billing her, whatever. I even had one attorney that I asked him when he wrote up the papers. I said, why did you put it that way? Because that's open-ended. He said, it's called job security. I said, no, it's called being a douche. You're making people have to go back to court. And that's ridiculous. It's financially draining. It's emotionally draining. It's just all these things that's not healthy for anybody. And most judges will tell you, if you and your ex can't agree, I can guarantee you nobody's going to be happy when they leave here.
And it lasts a long time too, and you're right. There are, I've heard a lot of judges admonish both parents. Mm-hmm. You guys just need to get along. You guys need to figure out, it shouldn't be me making the decision for you. And it's all just platitudes, because the thing of it is that I think as soon as you have a judge who admonishes you, or your lawyer or whoever, or guardians ad litem, there's a guardian ad litem in a particular state who my clients seem to get her a lot. And she's very good at stating, you guys are spending money on a court case when you should just be. And anytime you have a court professional who says, you guys are spending money needlessly, you guys need to get along, you guys need to work with each other. These are court professionals who believe that both parents are the problem. And right. There's absolutely no hope that these people are going to understand that one of them is an abuser. Right. No hope. So then what we're doing, the work I'm doing with my strategy background, frankly, is to take a look at the case from a different angle, because we can't go in and just say he's abusive, he's a jerk, he's neglectful. We're looking for other things that the court will take seriously, because right. What they take seriously is domestic abuse, unless, and I don't want to trigger anybody, but unless there's a hospital visit about it, then they have no proof that it's there. And let us not forget that, especially if women, who are the people who are most likely to be abused, if they talk about the abuse, the court likes to call it alienation. As in, well, the only reason you're accusing him of being an abuser is so that you can keep the kids all to yourself and alienate the father. It's kind of like, no, the kids just don't want to go over there and be belittled and called names, or not have lunch, or be hit, or fill in the blank, unfortunately. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But instead, I find that a lot of protective moms are fighting the narrative that there is no abuse. It's just that the mom has enmeshment, or alienation, or gatekeeping, or, fill in the blank on that. And that's where one has to come in at a different angle, because I think a lot of what I see are protective parents coming in with the same thing again and again. And I believe that a large part of that is because lawyers are coming in with the same bag of tricks, because there's no strategy there, right? There are good lawyers at least have tactics, right? They at least have tactics. But if strategy is an umbrella, tactics are over here. Right? There's other pieces under that umbrella as well that you have to have in order to have a strategy, so that you're pivoting instead of scrambling when something unexpected happens. A strategy doesn't mean you control every step of the way. It means you've got an overarching plan that has brilliant tactics that are interconnected inside of it, along with a whole lot of knowledge and ability to pivot, and plans as to where you will pivot to when you need to. So that when something unexpected happens, that you're all kind of like plan B or plan C, right? Yeah. That's not, by the time people come to us, or when people come to us, I have never in my life had anyone come to us who already had a strategy in place. Never, not once in all the time I've done this.
Wow.
No. And there they are spending, tens of thousands of dollars on, their lawyer, and, in California, hundreds of thousands of dollars for what? And that's the thing I will say that I want people to understand. I have clients in California who pay their lawyers $1,000 an hour. I have clients who are in, BC who are paying their lawyer like $100 an hour. I'm still finding that the lawyer is either good or they're not.
Right.
So no, you don't need to be paying $650 an hour to find the best lawyer. You just need to find the best lawyer, and they might be $325 an hour in an area that doesn't normally go below $450 an hour, right?
Right.
But even then, if you have a great lawyer, we still find that our clients talk to them too much, email them too much. And it's like, but you have to be communicating with them. And so, we find ourselves being like, let's start saving you thousands upon thousands of dollars right now. And not only have your lawyer like still be communicated with, but actually start to feed them strategy without them even realizing that's what you're doing. Right. So they're standing up for you in court. They've got like this narrative that is completely backed up by not just evidence, but exactly the right type of evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has to be one of the things that has to be considered, right? It's
right.
You want to get a good lawyer, but at the heart of it, almost, I'm not going to say completely, but what we find and what I end up showing clients a lot is it almost doesn't matter who your lawyer is. It almost doesn't matter, but it matters how you're showing it. It matters what you are feeding your lawyer, what you are giving them, when you are giving it to them, when you are emailing them versus, nothing anybody could do about this except document it. Right.
I think a lot of times, and I was guilty of this in the beginning, you don't know what's pertinent information for your lawyer to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
You print out 80 million pages on Facebook of, dad drinking or whatever, and the kids in the background, and you think that's important. So you pay the attorney, whatever it is, an hour to look through their Facebook page or to look through this stuff, and then none of it gets used.
None of it. We only use, honestly, we like to say 5% of your evidence is used, but that number is too high now because of how much digital evidence has come into things over the past 3 years or so. I know it seems like it's been longer. It actually is not. But over the past 3 years or so, over the past 3 years or so, now we've got the majority of people's evidence is digital. And it's, if you keep, if you're in a one-party consent state, then a big part of what you're doing is you're recording all of the handoffs, maybe, right? You are recording the parent-teacher conference, you're recording this, you're recording that, so that most of the recordings, by the way, are really for defense. In case they ever accuse you of something, you have proof that nothing happened at this parent. You did not pick up desks and start throwing them out the window at the parent-teacher conference. Right. Here's the recording of the parent-teacher conference from the time I left the house to driving to starting the conference to the end of the conference to me getting in my car and driving away and getting home. You can hear that from start to finish. The recording's too long, but you know what it doesn't have in it? Me throwing desks out the school windows. Right. So there are ways that we have people do recording, and there are times where we're like, do record this, which is almost all the time. But the reality is that we're only looking for 2 or 3 golden recordings to be able to show the entire case. So saying 5% is, what we're looking for at this point, we're only looking for about 3% because of the sheer volume of evidence that everyone now has these days.
Right. Yeah. I know, like I said, I went through several attorneys, and that one that actually cared about my son, I refer him to everybody.
Good. Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, like, I love this man because I knew he cared about my son. It wasn't what Lori wanted. It wasn't what the ex wanted. It was what is best for little Johnny, right? And it's rare that you find that people truly care. And when you find something like that, you want to hang on to it.
Yes, you do. And definitely referring these people out is the gift. That is such a huge pay it forward to have somebody who gets it.
Right. And I know too, one of the biggest things that drove me crazy with the whole court system is it's like gambling. You never know what you're going to get. And then even with mediators, you mentioned this earlier, they scare you into things.
Yes, they do.
They're like, well, yes, it makes sense that he would have to pay all your attorney's fees because he caused this, but a judge could look at it and say, well, he made a bad decision and he's paid for it in other ways. He shouldn't have to pay for attorney's fees for this. Where I'm like, why not? And like I told you, I was in court 18 years. I won every time, but it still cost me a fortune.
Yep. That's the thing. Yeah.
My kid could be driving a Jaguar right now.
It's an interesting thing too, because a lot of times when we are talking to people who are on the other side, like you, every once in a while, we have people show us what their agreement looked like, their court orders, and they're never detailed or specific enough. And we will at times get people coming to, actually the majority of people come to us are what we call the middle of your case, which means as long as you've had even one court appearance, one filing in your larger case, you are now in the middle of your case. And that could be that you're there for another year. It's more likely that you're going to be there for another, 3 years or so at least, right? If not longer. But what we know makes it a lot longer are the people who come to us who've been in court, they're being pulled back into court or they're going back to court for a modification. And we're first meeting them and we're looking at all of their paperwork from the first round of them being in court 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And when we look at the parenting plan that they've been following, it's horrifying because we basically could tell them, you're probably fighting over Hanukkah still, right? You're probably fighting over, I see your Christmas schedule. You guys fight over this every year, don't you? Because the way that the court professionals, including people's own lawyers, the kinds of court orders or agreements, parenting agreements that lawyers or judges force onto parents is so loosey-goosey, not recognizing that you have a narcissistic personality disordered individual, a cluster B disordered individual, who's going to say, if it isn't perfectly prescripted, then quite frankly, it's my interpretation of what this means. We have my favorite example, which I don't even have one. This has happened now 3 times that we have had a parent that basically said, it says here that my vacation is a week. And, the mom will be all kind of like, yes, but your dates are from August 1st to August 13th. You're taking 12 days. And literally they will put it in writing. Yes, that is a week. And so when we are having people put together their parenting plan agreements for those who want to go into settlement, we're always saying, you say a week's vacation. You can't write that. That's ridiculous. You have to go and you have to say that
7 days,
5 o'clock on day 1, and that the drop off will be at 5 o'clock on day 7.
right?
You have to say that. Because a week does not equal 7 days in a cluster B personality disordered person's mind. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't, because, and the reasons, 2 of them had the same reason, but the reasons that they come up with for it is they feel that the weekends are part of it, is usually how they get to 12 from 7.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to take your weekend too. And it's kind of like, where in our agreement or court orders or anything like that, does it say this? Like, where are you getting this? They're getting it in the cluster B personality disordered head, where all they want is punishment and control. You have to be punished because you saw them for who they were and said, no, thank you. And you took their property, yourself and the children, right? That's a big part of it right there. And then also they're cluster Bs. If they don't have control, then they can't breathe, And so these agreements, these court orders, when people come back to us for modifications, when people are in court again and again and again for years, it's because that original court order, that original agreement that their lawyer said it's too specific, YOLA controlling, that our client didn't push back and say, too bad. This is what it needs to look like because I need to have peace as much as is possible. I know that no matter what, when it's a birthday, a graduation, a holiday, he's going to kick up dust. But I want that dust to barely come up, right? It's like, it can't be like pigpen level dust from peanuts, right? I can't be walking around with this stuff all over me. It's got to be, he just kicks up dust. He inconveniences us on our child's birthday, but that's okay because I picked a different day for the birthday party. So let him have at it. There has to be ways where it's like the dust that they kick up is a very small little cloud that settles back down because you've already figured it out. And your parenting plan does the rest because it is specific, even though your lawyer hated your guts for making it that specific. You got to fight for it. Who are you trying to please? Your lawyer or you and your children, right? Don't be afraid. I always tell people, I want you to be a total yes person for your lawyer so that when it's time to say no, you've earned it. And you won't have to worry about whether or not they're going to drop you because you've said yes all along the way, but now you're in mediation and you're not going to sign it unless you get these 3 things. That's what you told me. So that's what you need to make sure your lawyer understands as well. Right. And it needs to be specific. And that's so important. It's so important.
And those are such great points because, like I said, my court order, I thought was black and white in the beginning, and it wasn't. Because you've got 2 different types of people reading this.
Yes.
My ex read it as suggestions.
That's exactly it.
And I read it like, I ain't going to jail.
Right. And that's the other thing. There's this total fear of being the one to break it. And look, I'm not going to say that's the most ridiculous thing to be thinking because, there's a great, Dr. Mohana and Barry Goldstein have this book that talks about the study. So what happened where all these students just went and observed family court and they were observing a bunch of things. They weren't just looking for anything.
Right.
One of the results that came out of it was that there is a very clear and severe bias against women in court. And if you go on to social media, it's like, oh, the court hates dads. They always give custody to moms. As a matter of fact, no. And the larger statistic done by other, neutral people who are studying it is that 70% of fathers who fight for custody get it. Right. And I'm all kind of like, nope, enter me in my company so that we can start to overcome this because it's like, it's not about moms versus dads for us. It's about protective parent versus abusive parent. Right. These children need to be taken care of, and so we have to find ways around it. And one of the things is that women are judged harshly. There's a family lawyer who works on my team as a divorce coach. And I always love when she basically comes and says, you got to remember the playground thing. You go to the playground and if you stay near your child, then you're a helicopter parent. If you sit back and check your email to see if they're going to deliver the cake on time, you're a neglectful parent. Mm-hmm. If you sit too far away, you're not watching your kid. Mm-hmm. If you are playing with your child, you're not letting them play with their peers. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing a mom can do right at the playground. Dad shows up and it's kind of like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Look how cute that is. And he brought him to the playground. What a great dad. And she loves to show that example. Here's the way I talk to him about parents. Moms have to have their noses completely clean. So unfortunately, yes, you do need to follow the parenting plan. Right. Even in the face of them not bothering, because the one thing you do wrong, you lose credibility. And it takes them about 48 things that they do wrong before the court goes, I don't know, maybe he's not so credible.
Yeah.
And so it's important to realize that while you can't live a life of paranoia, you left because you were walking on eggshells, for Christ's sake, that unfortunately, when you are co-parenting with a cluster B, then you kind of are forever walking on eggshells that they're going to take you back to court again because you dropped off 35 minutes late that one time, right? It's like I always tell clients, it's like, there is going to be that time you're dropping off a half hour late, and that has to be the only time ever, because the minute you do it another time, there's a pattern and you're in trouble.
Yep.
And it's going to be hard in court. It really is. So it's crazy. It's crazy. Like they'll drop off 30, 40, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours late. And the lawyers are right to say it's not enough. But you have a mom doing it a couple times. And what we know, especially from the Meyer study and the Saunders study, it's problematic. And it is something we're trying to change because it shouldn't be that way. And it's odd. You know,
think it's because women are viewed as more emotional?
No,
that's
not what the research bears out.
Okay.
I think it really has to do with it is the family court system. And this, I think, we're working to change this. And I want to be very clear about that. But when you look at the setup, it's a patriarchal setup. I'm not trying to start a bigger conversation here. Yeah. But when you look at it, whether you want to be political about it or not, because actually I know I should care more about that. But for me, I'm very much sort of like looking at strategy, looking at the facts, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, and then for me, it's kind of like, okay, those are the facts. What do I do to overcome it? Right. And I'm a huge fan of activists. I'm a huge fan of people who opine about things. I love that kind of stuff. It's wonderful. But for me, I just want to see what the actual facts are so that I can work within it. And that's how I like to do it. Right. And when I look at the facts, it's kind of like, yep, this is set up to be a very, very father-friendly court. It is set up that way.
Well, everybody will argue with you because, up until 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, every state was a mother state.
Well, okay. So let's kind of talk about that so that we can the argument can become something that's a more informed argument, right? Okay. So up until about the late 70s or so, it pretty much was just moms, right? And dads were the breadwinners, right? We saw that start, a little bit earlier, but I'm talking the largest numbers, the norms. All right. Mm-hmm. So if we look at around the late 70s, so right around the beginning of late 70s, early 80s, the father's rights sort of group started coming up. And at that time, what that meant was, look, when there's divorces becoming more and more frequent now, the nuclear family is being destroyed way more than it ever was. And the dads never did anything with the kids before. So now they're not so interested. And moms would kind of like for them to show up at least every other weekend. And so, the every other weekend was born, and that actually did a good job to biologically sort of, support these kids if they were with their primary attachment figure, right? Should that be true? Then that's great, But then right around 1984, we start to hear from Richard Gardner, and the fathers' rights groups became something different. They actually became anti-women, interestingly enough. And it was more, instead of it being about dads, please get involved. Moms need you. The children need you. It became dads, take away these children, they're yours. So it became more of a territorial property thing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, that probably would have died down because most people in the world don't think that way, right? Mm-hmm. Except we have the cluster B personality disorder, right? So when you have people who are abusive, when you have people who are cluster B, then what happened was those were the kind of people who sort of took control of the fathers' rights movement, and they were the ones who made it anti-moms, saying that moms were crazy. Munchausen by proxy, which is, by the way, extremely rare, is suddenly all over family court. You would think it happens all the time. And it's always against moms. There's even a woman who wrote a book about how family court has all kinds of moms who practice Munchausen. And it's like, except not really, Right. And so it's so the fathers' rights movement then sort of leaned into the HHS and started getting lobbying rights and a lot of dollars and grants and that type of thing. And so the system has now been set up to be, and it is sort of traveling a little bit more towards presumptive 50-50, but that's why I'm saying it's traveling a little bit more the other way to say, look, 50-50, there may be kids out there that's great for, honestly. Right. But when we've got a primary caregiver and a parent who doesn't know their children's best friend's name, teacher's name, or favorite color or bedtime, or favorite book, why are we talking 50-50? Then it becomes a property thing because it's not in the best interest of the children to say, look, you get to see, let's say dad, you get to see dad, he comes home tired, he doesn't talk to you, doesn't do anything, he gives you a kiss goodnight. But on some weekends, you guys go for a bike ride and the arcade and that type of thing. You're basically talking in every other weekend setup, but in a married home, right? Why then wouldn't you go into an 80-20? Right. And when men, I can't think of the name of the person who did this study. I love facts, right? I love to know what's really out there. And it's kind of interesting because there are men who will say, look, if it's 50-50, I don't have to pay child support, or I have to pay much, much less. Yes. And if you have a cluster B, 100%, they don't want to give, like my own ex told my lawyer, when we were all kind of, do you want to start paying child support? It's been 3.5 years and mom is really struggling. And he said, I don't want her to see a dime. Can you believe that?
Girl, I got one better for you.
Like, it's not,
yeah.
buying a Lamborghini or what a Maserati is. I think you said, I'm not even getting my nails done. Right. Even who I am, getting nails done is a pleasure every once in a while, but I just don't enjoy manicures personally. So it's not. And so what if I did? Right. So what if I wanted to go get the longest fake nails in the world and show them off? That is my right to do that.
Yep.
Right. But that's not, generally speaking, no, majority speaking, that's not what child support is actually used for. Right. But there's fight. And that's the accusation. She's using it for herself.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is actually what she'd like to do is have her income that she's earning be split between her and the needs of her child instead of entirely going to the needs of her child because you will not step up. And so there's this fight for 50-50 to not have to give money. And there's this fight for 50-50 to have control of property. But I'm always going to argue to the end, Lori, the thing for me is, what did that child experience before the divorce? Because that's that structure, that stability, that schedule, that primary caregiver should be mimicked as closely as possible. And it's really not that hard, especially if dad just took them for a bike ride into the arcade or likes to take them to Disney World. That is a weekend thing. That is not somebody who has ever helped them with homework. And no, in family court, they're not going to turn over a new leaf because the ones who will turn over a new leaf are the ones who didn't need to go to court to decide the custody arrangement after divorce.
Oh, that's a great point. That is a great point. Yeah, my ex told me that any penny that I got for child support, he would make sure was spent on attorneys.
Yeah, it's revenge. So you saw through him. You decided that you didn't want better than, and listen, and I want to be very clear about this, especially as a DV advocate, especially somebody experienced myself. Some people leave right off the bat. Some people take 20 years to leave. Everyone is leaving at the time that they are ready to leave.
Yes.
And I am not for 1 minute going to say, I can't believe you stayed with that person for 6 years, because my question is, I can't believe that person abused you for 6 years and never once took a look in the freaking mirror.
Yeah, I had an instance. It was really weird though, because it was after, and I'm probably going to botch how I say this, but at some point, if there was proof of physical abuse, the cops were supposed to arrest the person, right? Without the person having to press charges. Well, There was proof. I had bruises all over me, but the last time he threw me down the steps, I snatched him with me. And so there was a little tiny dime-sized bruise on him. And the cop said, "You'll go to jail too."
Yep.
Lori ain't going to jail. I'm telling you, not going to happen. Then the weird thing is they start sending you domestic abuse or violence stuff at the address where that it happened.
You can't do that. I don't know who did that.
They did.
That's insane. You can't do that.
It was crazy. You
endanger the victim when you do stuff like that.
It was crazy. And the thing is, my fear was always that behavior was going to get done to my son.
Well, and you're not wrong about that. The courts believe differently. Statistics show a minimum, and this is not recent statistics because, the thing of it is that it takes a while for these studies to be written up and peer reviewed. But the most recent peer reviewed study says that 60% of abusers will abuse their children. I think it's astronomically higher. Even more so if you have somebody who is either a strangulator or a coercive controller. So both ends of the extremes. Someone who strangulates has a high likelihood of doing so with the children. They also are more homicidal. And then, of course, the people who are coercive controllers and that type of stuff, their MO, this is how they operate. Just because there's a littler person, it doesn't mean that their brain suddenly changes. That's the belief. It's almost like cuteness aggression. Our brain changes when we see a cute puppy or the cat looks so cute that we just want to, I always tell my son, I just want to squeeze her till her head pops off.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's the name for that, cuteness aggression, right? You're not really going to squeeze them that hard at all, but in your head, you're like, they're like,
yeah.
So your brain switches, but it knows better. But that sort of concept is what the court thinks. Well, they may have abused a romantic partner, they like to say, but they're not going to do it to a child, especially not their own child. It's kind of like, actually, you've just handed them the perfect victim because nobody believes children, right? They're lying. They don't understand. They misunderstand, whatever. Right. And you've also got children who normalize because that's what children do. Just because they go on a play date and see a really nice dad, well, their dad is really nice when company's over too. So their dad is really nice when company's over to a nightmare behind closed doors. So just because they went on a play date and little Tommy's dad was nice, well, I know that Tommy's dad is actually mean to him behind closed doors too, because that's dad. That's what a dad does.
Yep.
Right? So they normalize this kind of behavior to a point where, it's the, can't think of the right word for it, but it's basically, it's not quite egocentric. It's something else,
Right.
but it's where they see things through their own eyes because they don't understand that something isn't normal until right around age 8, it starts to come into play. And then we see it a little bit later.
You had a good point too. And I want to bring this up while we wrap up about people leave when it's their time. Everything happens when it's right for that person for that to happen.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine when that happened to me, and she told me, she said, if you go back, don't ever call me again.
Oh no, that's
I'm like, well, that's pretty crappy.
Yeah. And it's also a lack of understanding. It is hard. Listen, and I'm going to say this because I say this. It's important for people to hear. I was that person before I was abused. Why would anybody stay with somebody like that? Why would somebody go back to somebody like that?
Oh, I always say, if somebody lays a hand on me, I'm done. You kick into some kind of crazy thought process. You blame yourself. It's weird.
That's just it. You don't understand it until you've been in it completely. And the other thing I want to say about many people cannot leave because the purse strings are tied up. My ex emptied my bank account and I had the largest savings I'd ever had in my life. I was so proud of myself. It got emptied. And it wasn't because he took it and ran with it. It was, gosh, you earn more than me. So why don't you pay for this and that and this and that and this and that? And let's go here and there. And then the money was gone. Right. So they might have the purse strings in one way or another. Many times they move you far away from your family. Right. So you might end up living where so they take away your support system. Let's just simplify it. They take away your money. They take away your support system. They threaten you with your pet. They threaten you by saying, I'm going to take the kids because I'm the mayor. I'm a police officer. I'm successful. I have a lot of friends. People like me, whatever. Just the threat of them taking the children and keeping them is enough for parents to be all kind of like, for survivors to basically be all like, I cannot leave. It takes a long time for people to leave. Right. And there's an average, this statistic I cannot remember, so I'm not going to say what it is, but there is a statistic that says somewhere between, I can't remember, somewhere between 7 and 12 times, it takes someone 7 to 12 times to leave before they actually stay gone.
I would lean towards 7.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, what is it? Right. So it's whether they start to leave and then they back off of it, or whether they leave and come back, those all count, because it's kind of like, what is it that really where do you need to be? Who needs to be there for you? How much money do you need to have? Right. Remember, people are kind of like, well, you can just make money when you leave. Really? Because a lot of my clients basically weren't allowed to have money, weren't allowed to have a job, and now nobody will rent to them because they have no credit history. Right. Nobody will give them a credit card because they have no credit history. Sometimes I have clients that can't even get a bank account because they have no history, right, because of the purse strings being held. So no, we can't judge anybody for when they left. And even if somebody has all the money in the world and their relatives are around them, there are still reasons that they cannot leave. And let us not forget the last thing, which is within the first year of someone leaving an abuser, the chances of them being killed by that abuser is very high.
Yeah. And a lot of times, if there's children involved, and we're just going to say the mom doesn't want to leave because she knows dad's going to get visitation with the kids and she won't be there to protect the kids.
There are a lot of moms who will stay and suffer abuse because at least she's the buffer.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason
it's like, I have admiration for every kind of mom there is out there. The ones who stay and are the buffer, the ones who suddenly get support or suddenly get the right information that they need to leave, the ones, all of them, because you are thrust into an impossible situation. I can't judge what you're doing with that. Come on.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. And the reason I said 7 times is because I've read in many different places, like the alcoholic that tries to quit drinking, it takes 7 times at rehab. It's like that 7 seems to be a popular number. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Renee, it has been great having you as a guest.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm grateful to have been here. It was a good conversation. Yeah, in spite of what we're talking about, I think it's a good conversation to have.
It is.
For people to Understand.
Well, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Oh, sure. So the best place to find me is thecustodyblueprint.com. Make sure you put the word "the" in front of it, thecustodyblueprint.com. That's a good place to find, a little bit about what we do and that type of thing. For those people who are just kind of like, I got to learn more here, find us on YouTube, The Custody Blueprint. We're there really at The Custody Blueprint, just about anywhere except Twitter. And you can find us. And for people who are going into an evaluation, I strongly recommend, if they start nowhere else, that they start with our Substack, because that is focused on every tiny, I'll be writing forever because there's so many different facets to an evaluation. And so there's value in every single post. And that post is every other week that comes out. So that is the custodyblueprint.substack.com. And that's a great place to just sit and read and start to think and strategize for yourself.
All right. Well, thank you again. And we'll have to have you back.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. And remember that life is good.
And it really is when you nacho.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nacho Kids podcast. Find us online at nachokids.com. Until next time, remember, life is good when you nacho.